The explosion ripped through the chemistry lab like a vengeful god, sending glass shards spinning through the air as Cale Bronson threw himself across the burning table. His leather jacket caught fire as he wrapped his arms around the woman trapped. Beneath the collapsed ventilation system, her dark hair singed and her amber eyes wide with terror. "I've got you," he growled, his voice barely audible over the roar of flames consuming the university's science building. The woman he'd seen her around campus but never spoke to her was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, her lab coat smoking. "The samples," she gasped, pointing toward a reinforced cabinet that was already beginning to buckle from the heat. 3 years of research, forget the damn samples." Cale hauled her to her feet, noting how she favored her left leg. Without hesitation, he swept her into his arms, ignoring the searing pain as flames licked at his exposed skin. The exit was blocked by debris, but he remembered the service corridor from his days working maintenance to pay for his engineering degree. As they stumbled through smoke-filled hallways, she clutched a small metal case to her chest, something she'd managed to grab despite the chaos. "I'm Lirelei," she whispered against his neck, her breath warm despite the hellish circumstances. "Lirelei Voss." "Cale," he replied, kicking open the emergency exit just as the main structure began to collapse behind them. They tumbled onto the grass outside, both gasping for clean air, while sirens wailed in the distance. Lirelei's amber eyes met his through the orange glow of the burning building. And something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with the disaster they'd just escaped. The paramedics separated them, but Cale couldn't stop watching her as they treated her injuries. She was beautiful and a fierce, intelligent Waltha kind of woman who could calculate molecular structures in her head while the world burned around her. When she looked back at him over the paramedic's shoulder, her gaze held gratitude mixed with something deeper, something that made his chest tighten. "The case," she called out as they loaded her into the ambulance. "Don't let them take the case!" Cale nodded, tucking the metal container inside his jacket. He had no idea what it contained, but if it meant that much to her, he'd guard it with his life. The ambulance pulled away, leaving him standing in the smoky darkness with second-degree burns on his arms and a woman's research clutched against his heart. 3 days later, he found her in the hospital, her leg elevated in her brilliant mind, already working on salvaging what remained of her life's work. When she saw him enter with the case, her entire face lit up with a smile that made every burn worth it. "You kept it safe," she breathed, reaching for his bandaged hands. "You saved everything." "I saved you," he corrected, settling into the chair beside her bed. "The research was just a bonus." That's when Lirelei Voss, the woman who could synthesize compounds that defied conventional chemistry, looked at the man who'd carried her through fire and realized he'd already begun to heal. Something in her she didn't even know was broken. Weeks after the fire, Cale appeared at Lirelei's apartment door with groceries and a determination that both frustrated and warmed her. She'd been struggling with simple tasks. Her injured leg made climbing stairs torture. Her burned hands shook whenever she tried to work with delicate equipment. "I don't need a babysitter," she protested as he unpacked fresh vegetables and homemade soup, though her stomach growled traitorously at the smell. "Good thing I'm not applying for the position." His green eyes held a stubborn gleam that she was beginning to recognize. "I'm applying to be your research partner." Lirelei stared at him from her position on the couch, her leg propped on pillows. "You're an engineering student. I'm working on advanced biochemical synthesis. I'm also the guy who memorized every safety protocol in that building while I was fixing broken equipment." Cale sat beside her, careful not to jar her injured leg. "I know you're trying to recreate your research. I know you're doing it in a kitchen that's barely equipped for making pasta, let alone groundbreaking chemistry." He was right, and they both knew it. The fire had destroyed everything except the samples she'd managed to save in that metal case. 3 years of work reduced to a handful of compounds that meant nothing without the proper equipment to analyze them. "I've been thinking," Cale continued, pulling out his tablet. "There's an abandoned warehouse on the east side. Good ventilation, solid electrical infrastructure. We could build a temporary lab there." Lirelei's eyebrows rose. "You want to become a criminal with me? Because setting up an unlicensed laboratory is definitely illegal. I want to help you rebuild." His voice was quiet but fierce. "You're brilliant, Lirelei. What you were working on, those compounds could revolutionize medicine. I saw the excitement in your eyes when you talked about them, even while the building was burning down around us." She studied his face, noting the way his jaw tightened with determination. Cale Bronson wasn't just offering to help. He was offering to risk everything for her dream. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely insane. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Cale's hand found hers, his fingers tracing the healing burns on her knuckles. "Because when I carried you out of that fire, I felt something I've never felt before, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be." He looked up at her, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "Because I think you felt it too." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they were ready to cross. Lirelei's research had always been her first priority, her only real relationship. But as she looked at this man who'd risked his life for her, who was now offering to risk his future, she realized that maybe some things were worth rebuilding from the ground up. "The warehouse," she said finally. "Show me the warehouse." Cale's smile was brilliant enough to power the entire city. "Tomorrow. Tonight you rest, and let me cook you something that doesn't come from a can." As he moved to the kitchen, Lirelei watched him work, noting the careful way he handled ingredients, the same precision he'd shown when carrying her to safety. She was beginning to understand that Cale Bronson didn't just save people, he helped them become who they were meant to be. The warehouse smelled of rust and old dreams, but Lirelei could see the potential in its soaring ceilings and bank of north-facing windows. Cale had spent the morning clearing debris while she sketched lab layouts, her injured leg propped on a makeshift stool. "Ventilation system goes here," she pointed to the far wall, her voice echoing in the empty space. "We'll need specialized ducting for the fume hoods." "Docked." Cale wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across his temple. "Friend of mine works demolition. Says he can get us lab-grade materials, no questions asked."
"This
is crazy," Lirelei muttered. But she was already calculating electrical requirements in her head. "We're talking about $10,000 in equipment minimum. I don't have that kind of money." "I do." Cale's voice was matter-of-fact. "Insurance settlement from a construction accident 2 years ago. I've been saving it for something important." She turned to stare at him. "You're going to spend your life savings on a maybe? On research that might not even work? I'm investing in you." He crossed to where she sat, his hands gentle as he helped her to her feet. "Besides, I've seen what you can do with limited resources. Give you proper equipment, and you'll change the world." The certainty in his voice made her chest tight. No one had ever believed in her work with such absolute faith, not even her former research partners. But Cale looked at her like she was already successful, like her breakthrough was inevitable rather than impossible. Over the next month, they transformed the warehouse into something that would have made her university colleagues weep with envy. Cale's engineering background proved invaluable. He designed custom storage systems and safety protocols that went beyond anything she'd worked with before. He anticipated her needs before she voiced them, appearing with specialized equipment, just as she realized she needed it. "How did you know I'd need a precision scale?" she asked one morning, finding the device perfectly calibrated and waiting. "On her workstation. You got that look?" he said, not looking up from the electrical panel he was installing. "Same one you had right before you asked for the centrifuge. I have a look. You get this little crease between your eyebrows when you're thinking about measurements." His smile was fond. "It's the same expression you had when you were calculating molecular weights while the lab was literally on fire." Lirelei felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the Bunsen burner. Somewhere between the fire and the warehouse, between shared takeout dinners and late-night research sessions, she'd begun to notice things about Cale too. The way he hummed while he worked, how he always brought her coffee exactly the way she liked it, the careful way he touched her when he thought she wasn't looking, like she was something precious that might break. "Cale," she said softly, setting down her equipment. "What are we doing here?" He straightened, his eyes meeting hers across the lab they'd built together. "Building something beautiful," he said simply. "The question is whether you're talking about the research or something else." She crossed the space between them, her leg no longer hindering her movement. "What if I said both?" His hands framed her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. Then I'd say, "You're even more brilliant than I thought." When he kissed her, it was with the same careful intensity he brought to everything else, thorough, patient, and completely overwhelming. Lirelei had always been focused on the future, on the next breakthrough. But for the first time in her life, she was perfectly content to exist in the present moment. The compound crystallized at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and Lirelei's victory cry echoed through the warehouse loud enough to wake Cale from his makeshift bed in the office corner. He stumbled out in boxers and a t-shirt, his hair sticking up at impossible angles, to find her dancing around the lab bench with a beaker held high like a trophy. It worked. She shouted, her amber eyes bright with triumph and exhaustion. "Cale, it actually worked." He caught her as she spun toward him, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around while she laughed. "The pain inhibitor." Better than that? She was breathless with excitement. "It's not just blocking pain signals, it's accelerating cellular repair, Cale. This could revolutionize trauma medicine. Burn victims, accident survivors, soldiers, people like us," he said quietly, his hand still circling her waist. "People like us." She nodded, then seemed to realize they were standing very close in the dim lab lighting, her hands pressed against his chest. "I couldn't have done this without you. You would have found another way. You'd always do." His voice was rough with something that wasn't quite about the research. "You're the most determined person I've ever met." "I'm also the most scared," she admitted, her forehead resting against his collarbone. "What happens now? We can't exactly publish this research. Through normal channels, we'll figure it out." His arms tightened around her, but first we celebrate. The celebration turned into something deeper when Cale produced a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for when you changed the world. He said, "Dan." They found themselves on the couch in the office, her legs draped over his lap while he traced patterns on her skin. "I love watching you work," he murmured against her temple. "The way you get completely absorbed, like nothing else exists." "Something else exists now," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "You exist." The admission hung between them, weighted with months of growing feelings. Neither had been brave enough to name. Lirelei had always been afraid of distractions, of anything that might pull her focus from her work. But Cale didn't distract her. He sharpened her focus, made her better at everything she touched. "I love you," he said simply, as if stating a fundamental law of physics. "I love you too," she replied, surprised by how easy it was to say. "But Cale, if we're going to do this, really do this, we need to be smart about it. The research, the legalities, all of it. We will be." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "But tonight, can we just be two people who built something incredible together?" They made love on the couch, surrounded by the hum of equipment and the smell of successful chemistry. And when Lirelei fell asleep in his arms, she dreamed of a future where breakthrough, discoveries, and deep love weren't mutually exclusive. The next morning brought reality in the form of a knock on the warehouse door. Cale answered it to find a woman in an expensive suit flanked by two men who looked like they'd never smiled in their lives. "Mr. Bronson? Ms. Voss?" "I'm Dr. Helena Vex from Meridian Pharmaceuticals. We need to talk." Lirelei appeared at Cale's shoulder, her lab coat hastily thrown over yesterday's clothes. "How did you find us?" "Your former department head mentioned your research before the fire. We've been monitoring developments." Dr. Vex's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "We understand. You've made significant progress in pain management synthesis." "We haven't published anything," Cale said carefully, his hand finding Lirelei's. "Which is exactly why we're here." Dr. Vex stepped forward. "We'd like to make you an offer you can't refuse." Dr. Vex's offer was everything Lirelei had dreamed of, and everything she'd learned to fear. Unlimited funding, state-of-the-art facilities, a team of researchers, and enough legal backing to make their work legitimate. The catch, delivered with Dr. Vex's predatory smile, was that Meridian Pharmaceuticals would own everything: the research, the patents, the profits. "You'd be credited as the lead researcher, of course," Dr. Vex said, her manicured fingers drumming against the contract. "Dr. Voss, Your work could help millions of people. Surely that's worth more than personal profit. Lirelei felt Cale's tension beside her. The way his jaw tightened when he spotted the clause that would exclude him entirely from any future developments. And my partner's contributions? Mr. Bronson would be compensated for his... assistance. With a consulting fee. Dr. Vex's tone suggested she considered his role barely worth mentioning, though I'm sure he understands that serious pharmaceutical research requires proper credentials. Get out. Cale's voice was deadly quiet. Get out of our lab. I'm afraid. I can't do that. Dr. Vex's smile turned glacial. See, operating an unlicensed laboratory is a federal crime. Synthesizing controlled substances without proper permits is an even bigger crime. We could have you both arrested right now. You won't, Lirelei said, finally finding her voice. Because you want what we've created. What you've created belongs to the scientific community. Meridian is simply the best vehicle for bringing it to the world. Dr. Vex leaned forward. Sign the contract, Dr. Voss. Take the deal. It's the only way your research sees the light of day? After they left, Lirelei and Cale sat in the silence of their lab, the contract lying between them like a poisonous snake. Everything they'd built together, the equipment, the research, the future they'd imagined suddenly felt fragile as spun glass. We could run, Cale said finally. Take the research and disappear. Find another way. Where would we go? There. Write about the licensing. We're criminals, Cale. I made you a criminal. Lirelei's voice cracked. Maybe I should take the deal. At least then the research would help people, without you getting any credit for it. Without us having any say in how it's used. Cale pulled her against him, his voice fierce. This is your life's work. I won't let them steal it from you. Then what do we do? Before he could answer, Lirelei's phone buzzed with a text from Anne. Unknown number. Meet me at Caf Luna, downtown. Come alone. I can help. A friend. It's a trap, Cale said immediately. Vex is trying to separate us. Maybe. Or maybe it's someone who actually wants to help. Lirelei grabbed her jacket. Either way, we need allies. I'm going. Not alone? You're not. They found Caf Luna nearly empty, except for a woman in the corner booth, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes sharp with intelligence. She looked like she'd been beautiful once, before life had carved wisdom and weariness into her features. Dr. Voss. Mr. Bronson.
Oh.
She gestured for them to sit. I'm Dr. Iris Thorne. I used to work for Meridian. Used to. Lirelei slid into the booth across from her, Cale close beside her, until I discovered how they acquire their most promising research. They've done this before. Find desperate scientists to offer them impossible choices, then profit from their discoveries, while the original researchers disappear into legal obscurity. Dr. Thorne's smile was bitter. It did it to me 15 years ago. I've been waiting for the right opportunity to return the favor. You want revenge, Cale said. I want justice. And I want to help you get what you deserve. Dr. Thorne leaned forward. I know people, investors, lawyers, politicians who owe me favors. People who can help you establish your own company, get proper licensing, bring your research to market on your own terms. What's the catch? Lirelei asked. No catch. It's just an old woman who's tired of watching brilliant minds get crushed by corporate greed. Dr. Thorne's eyes softened. Besides, I've been following your work since before the fire. What you've created could change everything. It deserves to be shared with the world the right way. Hope flickered in Lirelei's chest for the first time in days. How long do we have? Vex will expect an answer within 48 hours. After that, she'll make good on her threats. Dr. Thorne slid a business card across the table. Call me tonight. We have work to do.
Actor.
Thorne's network was more extensive than Lirelei had dared hope. Within 24 hours, she'd assembled a team that included a patent lawyer who specialized in pharmaceutical law, a biotech investor with deep pockets and deeper grudges against Meridian, and a former FDA administrator who'd been looking for a way to support ethical research. Voscor Therapeutics, the lawyer, Marcus Rivera, announced as he spread papers across the warehouse conference table they'd hastily assembled, will fast-track your incorporation, get you proper licensing, and have patent applications filed before Meridian knows what hit them. The funding is already in place. added Dr. Evangeline Cross. The investor, whose silver hair and sharp suit couldn't hide the fierce intelligence in her eyes. 50 million in seed funding, with more available as you reach development milestones. Literally. Felt dizzy. 50 million. Your compound isn't just promising, it's revolutionary. The applications for trauma medicine, chronic pain management, even neurological disorders. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar market. Dr. Cross smiled. Unlike Meridian, we believe the people who make the discoveries should reap the benefits. Cale's hand found hers under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. What about the timeline? Vex wants an answer by tomorrow, then we'll give her one. Dr. Thorne's smile was sharp as a blade. But first, we need to secure your research. Every sample, every formula, every note gets copied and stored in multiple locations. If Meridian tries to destroy your work, we'll be ready. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of legal documents, secure data transfers, and strategic planning. Lireley found herself CEO of her own company. With Cale as her chief technology officer, and Dr. Thorne as her advisory board chair, it felt surreal, like playing dress-up in someone else's dream. Are you sure about this? She asked Cale, as they worked side by side, copying research files. You're giving up your engineering degree for something that might fail spectacularly. Not giving up anything. He looked up from the computer screen, his green eyes serious. I'm gaining everything. A company, a future, a chance to build something meaningful with the woman I love. The woman you love, who's about to go head-to-head with one of the most powerful pharmaceutical companies in the world. The woman I love, who's brave enough to change the world. He kissed her forehead. Besides, we've already survived fire and corporate espionage. How much worse can it get? The answer came at exactly 5 p.m., when Dr. Vex arrived with twice as many security personnel as before. I trust you've had time to consider our generous offer, she said, her smile predatory. We have. Lireley stood, Cale beside her. Both of them dressed in their finest clothes, the first professional attire they'd owned in months, and were declining. I'm afraid that's not an option. Dr. Vex gestured to her security team. You're operating an illegal laboratory. I have no choice but to report you to the authorities. Actually, Marcus Rivera stepped out from behind a piece of equipment. His own team of lawyers flanking him, Voscor Therapeutics is fully licensed and properly registered. All research activities are completely legal. Dr. Vex's composure cracked for the first time. That's impossible. We didn't have the resources. We have very resourceful friends. Dr. Thorne appeared from the office, her smile arctic. Hello, Helena? It's been a while, Iris. Dr. Vex's voice was pure venom. I should have known you'd interfere. You should have known I'd never forget. Dr. Thorne's voice was quiet but deadly. Now, I believe you have a choice. You can leave peacefully, or we can discuss your company's history of research theft with the Pharmaceutical Ethics Board. For a moment, Lireley thought Dr. Vex might actually try to fight. But then, the woman's mask slipped back into place, and she smiled her razor-sharp smile. This isn't over, actually, Lireley said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. It is. We have everything we need to bring our research to market legally and ethically. Your company's threats are meaningless now. After Meridian's people left, the warehouse fell silent except for the hum of equipment and the sound of victorious breathing. They'd won not just the battle, but the war. So what now? Cale asked, his arm sliding around Lireley's waist. Now we change the world, she said simply. Together. 2 years later, Lireley stood in the gleaming lobby of Voscor Therapeutics headquarters. Watching CNN report on their latest clinical trial results, the compound that had crystallized in a converted warehouse was now helping trauma patients. Around the world, the company they'd built from desperation and determination was being hailed as a model for ethical pharmaceutical development. Dr. Voss, her assistant Jamie, appeared at her elbow. The board meeting is ready to begin. Thank you. Lireley straightened her jacket designer now, but she still preferred working in the lab to sitting in boardrooms. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. She found Cale in their private lab, the one space in the building that remained unchanged from their warehouse days. He was bent over a microscope, his hair falling across his forehead in the way that still made her heart skip. "Any breakthroughs today, Dr. Bronson?" she asked, using his new title. The honorary doctorate from the university had been long overdue. Recognition of his contributions to medical technology, just one. He looked up, his green eyes bright with the same intensity they'd held that night in the fire. "I figured out how to synthesize a compound that makes me happy every single day." "Really? What's the formula?" "One brilliant scientist, one converted warehouse. Add heat and pressure until crystallization occurs." He pulled her into his arms, spinning her around like he had that night 2 years ago. "Results guaranteed." "That's terrible science," she laughed, but she kissed him anyway, tasting the future on his lips. "Speaking of terrible science," Cale said when they broke apart, "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his lab coat pocket, not a ring box, but something more precious. Inside was a glass vial containing a single perfect crystal, amber-colored and beautiful. "The first sample," she breathed. "From that night, I kept it." His voice was soft. "Wanted to remember the moment everything changed. Everything changed the moment you carried me out of that fire." "No," he said, his hands framing her face. "Everything changed the moment you decided to trust me with your dreams." The ring came later, over dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first official date. It was a simple band set with a stone that matched her eyes, designed by a jeweler who specialized in incorporating scientific elements into his work. "Marry me," Cale said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Let's build a life together that's as beautiful as the research we've created." "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." Their wedding was small, held in the warehouse where they'd fallen in love, surrounded by the equipment that had made their dreams possible. Dr. Thorne officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion, and their employees formed the wedding party. "You know," Leerle said as they danced to music played through the same speakers they'd used for late-night lab sessions, "I used to think love was a distraction from important work, and now I think love is the most important work of all." She looked around at their friends, their chosen family, the life they'd built from ashes and determination. "Everything we've accomplished together." "Together," Cale agreed, spinning her under the lights of the laboratory that had become their world. "Always together." In the years that followed, Voskhor Therapeutics continued to grow, developing treatments that helped millions of people worldwide. Leerle and Cale published papers together, won awards together, and built a legacy that was as much about love as it was about science. Their personal lives grew too. House with a garden where Leerle grew the plants she used in her research. Children who inherited their parents' curiosity and determination. A foundation that provided grants to young scientists who dared to dream big. But sometimes, late at night when they were working side by side in their home lab, Leerle would catch Cale's eye and remember the moment he'd carried her through fire. Not just the physical fire that had destroyed her old life, but the metaphorical flames of fear and doubt that had kept her from believing. She deserved love alongside success. He'd saved her from those flames. Together they'd built something beautiful from the ashes. "I love you," she'd whisper, the words as constant as the chemical formulas that filled their days. "I love you too," he'd whisper back. And in that moment, surrounded by the work they'd created and the life they'd built, Leerle knew that some reactions were worth every risk. Their love story became legend in the scientific community, the brilliant researcher and the engineer who'd literally built their dreams from the ground up. But to them, it was simply the most successful experiment they'd ever conducted, the synthesis of two hearts into something stronger than either could have been alone. And in the end, that was the most important discovery of all.